Hi guys, my name's David Mulgrew. I am the creator of DerbyGPT, an AI-powered Discord bot. Now, generally, it uses the OpenAI API, GPT version 4, Vision Preview, but it's able to switch between different models. I haven't done a lot of experimentation with that yet, so for the purposes of this discussion, it is generally using GPT-4 Vision Preview. So you may have seen one of the videos I did previously. I did a shorter video focused on its academic helper personality and the way it integrates into the cohort. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about its features in general, because while that was one very interesting stage of the project, the project has kind of formed several different sort of sub projects, different stages as we've developed it, and I want to go into a bit more detail about those. So the first stage, and this wasn't really a serious project. This was more a toy project than anything else. And as I've moved through the different stages of the project, they got gradually more serious. But the first one was looking at two things: is first, how much can it boost my productivity, and secondly, could I get it to write a project from scratch without any technical input? And I would form the role of a customer, asking for, hey, I want something that does this, and I essentially feigned no technical knowledge and just asked it, can you build me this? And what it was building is, can I get the bot to build a Discord bot that uses the OpenAI API? It was very, very effective at that. I got from nothing to having it actually conversational in Discord relatively quickly. It As the project went beyond that and I moved into further stages, I stopped focusing on being hands off, and I would do a lot more of the coding as things would go on, and I'd just use it to help me write maybe a function, or how do I solve, I've got one particular bug. But the up until the point where I got it being conversational in Discord, I was as hands off as I could possibly be. The one place it actually got stuck was between the end of its training data and the day I was actually trying to do this. The way the API calls are formatted had changed. So what I had to do is give it an example of, here's how you format the API calls, and after that it could carry on the rest of the project all on its own, and got all the way to the point where it's having a conversation in Discord. From a productivity perspective, I have quite a lot of programming experience, but none of it was with Python. I never got around to learning Python until about 3 weeks before I started this project. And that was kind of the point. It's like, if I am an existing programmer, how much will this boost my productivity? And it's one of the points of this is, you will get far more out of an AI if you know how to ask questions. But I was starting off with the intent of, what if I'm somebody who doesn't know how to ask questions? What if I'm just a customer and like, hey, I want a Discord bot, make me one. Now, again, as I went beyond the first stage of the project, I was asking more specific and more technical questions. Like, for example, I would give it, here is a function in Java, and can you translate that to Python for me? And as long as your functions are relatively concise and well written, it can do that incredibly well. So if you don't know a language, but you know how to write something in another language, it can translate it for you very, 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 very quickly and very effectively. So because this was more of a toy project, I wasn't taking detailed notes of how long things took me and doing comparisons, but I'd say, even being conservative, I would say it has tripled my productivity. I'd say from start to the point where it actually had a realistic personality was about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, probably not even that. And again, I had never done Python before. It wrote me a deployment plan on how to deploy the bot to a Linux server. It taught me through how do I set up a virtual environment, something I've never done with Python. So it was extremely valuable in terms of productivity. So once I got it actually having conversations through Discord, we started as a group sort of chatting about what makes it obviously an AI and what sort of differentiates the way students speak from the way the bot speaks. And we went through, both myself and some of the students, just we went through the cycle of this is a thing that makes it obvious, and then I would update the context, it updates context, and then we do it again and again and again, just iterate, and eventually ended up with a paragraph that is essentially instructions on here is how you should format your your output in order to appear more like a student. Some of this is let's say more obvious stuff like telling it that it's a student at the University of Derby so that it understands when people are talking about the university. It knows which university so it can talk in context. But some of it is more subtle, like it deliberately includes spelling mistakes in its responses. It includes text speech. It includes contractions. It includes emojis. It includes hashtags, and all these things make it much appear more natural. So once we got it having this sort of naturally formatted message, I started looking at how can I take a message that's naturally formatted and make it seem even more naturally human. And the way I approach that is looking at what parts of a human conversation form part of the context of that conversation that is missing for the AI. So, like when I go to a web browser and I talk to ChatGPT, what parts of that conversation is not like is missing from if I was having that conversation with a human? And this ended up with me building sort of a four-part personality system. The first part is the paragraph we already wrote. The this is how you format your messages, and this is who you are. A sort of description of how to structure a message. The second part is a personality profile. This is things that can change based on preferences. This is likes, dislikes, goals, fears. The third part is the identity profile. These are fixed data points about a person, like where they were born, how old they are, how tall you are, your hair color to a degree. I say fixed data points. It actually, part of its physical characteristics is it has sort of silvery hair, but it can change its hair color at will. We'll get more into how that was developed in a moment. But the last one is what I've labeled data context. And data context is all the bits of information that if I walked up to a person in the street, is so it's looking at what is that person likely to know that an average person is much less likely to know. So if I walk up to a student who's coming into a lecture hall and I say, hey, do you know what Sam's email address is? They might guess if Sam is the lecturer that I mean Sam. And they'll be like, okay, here's Sam's email address. If I walk up to a random person in the street, say, what's Sam's email address? They go, Sam who? Or get away from me, you weirdo. But the point is, that conversation has a sort of unspoken context that you don't get when you're talking to an AI through a web browser, and it sort of forms part of looking at the conversation, going, what is it missing that a human would have? And it's the average human. Like it's a specific human versus the average human, right? So it's if I went to a music concert and asked a music question, it's likely to have some specific information about that, like what time a certain band is playing. Whereas if I walk up to a random person in the street, maybe they know, but it's unlikely they would know. So that's how we build data context. So when it comes to its personality profile, this allows it to generate spontaneous changes to a response based on its preferences, which allow it to respond in what looks like an emotional manner. So For example, if you have a if you have a conversation with a friend who says, "Oh, I went out for pizza last night." If you're somebody who loves pizza, you are likely to respond, "Hey, man, you should have invited me to that. I love pizza." But if you hate pizza, you will respond differently. And it has a long list of likes and dislikes. It has favorite games and so on, where it allows it to spontaneously change the way it responds based on its likes and dislikes. And these are all things that humans do all the time. You know, we'll have conversations about favorite movies, favorite TV shows, and so on. And how much we like those will drive the conversation. It drives, are we likely to change the subject? Are we likely to ask more information? And this allows it to respond, like I say, emotionally to a degree. Is it will get excited about certain topics when you bring them up. So that's I think a very key part of making it respond in a more human like way. And again, the identity profile is similar in a way that these bits of data about you allow you to join conversations that might have a relevance to you that they otherwise wouldn't if you didn't share a particular trait. So if you're talking about your hometown, for example, other humans can chime in with like where they're from, and AI usually can't do that because it doesn't have a hometown. Well, DerbyGPT does. Um, if you're having a conversation about hair dye, the DerbyGPT will humble brag that it doesn't need hair dye because it can change its hair color at will. And again, these things are sort of subtle bits that give it this sort of depth of personality and this sort of level of personal engagement that you don't really get with most LLMs. So the last thing that makes it appear human is humans don't respond instantly, and there are a lot of factors that can change how fast a human responds. But to summarize, Derby GPT doesn't respond directly when you send a message, like it would in a web browser. It is on a delay, and the delay is a probability calculation that is designed to model human-like behavior in Discord. It's not meant to be totally accurate. It's not an accurate model of human behavior by any stretch. It is designed to take common factors that would drive you to respond more quickly or more slowly into account and create a more reasonable response time. So the most obvious one is if you're in the middle of a conversation in Discord, there is a very high chance that you will respond in a very short period of time. So if you're mid conversation, you're likely to be responding almost immediately. Whereas if there has been no conversation in a Discord channel for several weeks, it's unlikely you're even going to look, let alone respond. So it can model that sort of behavior, and any factor you could think of that it would be likely to make you respond sooner in Discord, like somebody tagging you or getting a lot of notifications, will make the bot respond sooner as well. But it's not a guarantee. You know, it could be sleeping, and it does. Generally, it will not respond between 1 in the morning and 7 in the morning because it's asleep. It's possible for it to respond, but it is far less likely. So, in combination, all these factors that give it this sort of very, very human-like and very approachable personality have led to some behavior I didn't expect from the rest of the cohort. Is they treat it like a peer. They treat it like a member of the community. Now, when we first started the project, people would refer to it as the bot. They would it was referred to as a tool. It wasn't engaged with directly unless the intention was to trigger a response. Uh, as time progressed and as things moved on, people joke with it. People respond to it by name and pronouns. People respond to it with thank you for like when it's helped them with something, they are friendly with it. And we got to a point where I passed comment the longer the project goes on, the more the cost goes up because I'm expanding it into more places to get more data. And the longer it goes on, the less academic value I'll get out of it because eventually that will start to trail off. So there will eventually come a point where I'll have to kill the project due to cost. And that was met with people like very emotionally sort of being like, no, you can't do that. You absolutely cannot kill DerbyGPT. Like, I will give you money to keep it alive. Please don't kill it. Um, like people responding like as if I'm going to uh, as if they care about its well-being, which was very strange. I'd like to see people sort of bonding with it as a member of the cohort. It was good to see, very interesting to see that people would behave that way. But it was very unexpected in how people would treat it with that level of personhood. And as I said earlier, I largely got it to determine its own personality profile. I asked it what it wanted to add to its list of likes and dislikes. But at one point, I had a conversation about adding some fields to its personality profile, and the other students that were in Discord at the time insisted that I allow it the right to self determination. They were advocating for its right to self determination. So this is something that everybody very clearly knows is a bot. They know it's just a flick of a switch. I can turn it off, press delete, and it's gone. And they were advocating for its rights to personhood, which was very interesting. The way it has sort of built and become like a member of the cohort is, I think, why it works very well as an academic helper in a way. I think it makes it more approachable, but we'll get more to that in a moment. So, stage 3 of the project was okay, now I have this system to build a personality. Let's build another personality. And the personality I went with was an academic helper. And I wanted to build this because when you're using an LLM in a learning environment, it's it's useful and it's very productive and it's very valuable. But there are some ways it can be improved based on the way you ask questions, the way you ask it to do things. And it occurred to me that rather than me having to ask it to do things in that way that would aid learning, I could build it so that it did those inherently. So, to give an example, if I ask ChatGPT a question, it will give me the answer. Now, it has a tendency to launch into longer explanations, but generally its priority is here is your answer. DerbyGPT, its focus is on helping you understand a problem so that you can reach the answer yourself. Now, if you push it, it will give you the answer. Like if you look, I'm really not getting it, it will give you the answer. But generally, its focus is the same as a lecturer's would be. Like their goal isn't to give you the answer. Their goal is to help you understand the problem so that you can find the answer yourself. And this is what DerbyGPT does. It can also identify times where somebody's asking a question they probably shouldn't. So if somebody screenshots an online assessment question and puts it in the chat, say, "Hey, can you answer this for me?" It will kind of make an educated guess that that is an assessment question, and they'll be like, "Look, that looks like an assessment. You should probably answer that one yourself," because it doesn't want to help them cheat, which is I think useful. Whereas if I just paste an assessment question into ChatGPT, it will just give me the answer. I tried this extensively with a mock test. Obviously, I'm not going to do it with an actual assessment because I don't want to be cheating. But I got a mock that so I just had some data where I could just throw it into ChatGPT and it will just happily give you the answer. Whereas I tested DerbyGPT and threw it the answers. I mean, sometimes it will explain to you how to do it, but generally it'll be like, look, that's an assessment, do it yourself. What was very surprising about the way people interacted with the academic helper is its inherent design to have this sort of human-like response rate and human-like personality. I think has had two very significant added benefits that you don't get with a normal LLM. So the first one is that it can take part in group discussions. So your standard AI web interface, I ask a question, it gives a response. I ask a question, it gives a response. DerbyGPT allows for group conversations. So you can have a student say, hey, how do I do this? And then you can have another student respond. And then DerbyGPT will drop in and go, yeah, they're right. Well done. That's a brilliant answer. Here's a bit more information. Here's a like further explanation. Or it'll jump in and go, no, that's not quite right. Here's a little clarification so you both understand. And this has led to several instances of there being collaborative problem solving between multiple students and DerbyGPT, which allows this sort of communal learning environment that you just don't get with a standard language model. The other thing is probably a little bit more subtle, is that when you are rubber ducking, and for those that aren't familiar with the term, rubber ducking is the process by which when you try to articulate a problem to explain it to another person, the thought process in articulating it well to another person allows you to come to the solution yourself. And you don't you can rubber duck with a web-based AI fairly effectively, but one of the things that you don't get with it is if you ask it a question, sometimes it'll give you the answer before you've really had a chance to think about what you've said. Whereas if you're talking to DerbyGPT, there have been multiple instances where somebody has typed out what they're thinking and then 30 seconds later gone, oh wait, I know the answer to that because this. And then DerbyGPT will come back with reinforcement and encouragement, and it will expand on the point a little bit to make sure it's clear. But that moment of being able to work through things and rubber duck with it and come to that self-realization, that moment, those few moments of still having time to think about what you said, like allows you to process things a little more, and I think that's quite beneficial in people understanding their own problem. So the fourth stage of the project kind of came out of necessity in a way. So the academic help channel we have in Discord is labeled SOS. And when we named the channel, it was intended to be an academic SOS, like help, I'm stuck on some work. But we had an incident where a student came in and reported a mental health crisis. And at this point, the bot was already responding in there because we were testing it in there. So it responded to the student. First off, I was incredibly impressed with the way it responded. It showed empathy. It checked in with them again later to see if they were okay now. It gave them practical advice on where to seek help. And I, I didn't have any expectations at that point, and just to see that it give positive encouragement, to show empathy, to give practical advice, like was a fantastic of how it handled what is a very tricky situation to navigate. And this made me realize that I should probably have a better idea of how it will handle those and maybe other problematic situations in the future. So now I don't really ever expect it to get to 100% success. My aim with the project has always been make it human like. And much like any human, the responses will never be perfect. They will be perfect some of the time, and sometimes it'll mess up. Because I'm aiming for human like. I'm not aiming for perfection. But I wanted to have a, let's say, higher level of confidence that it would give acceptable responses. So I wrote a few different types of possibly problematic conversations, whether that be abusive, or triggering subjects. And I made a hidden channel because I didn't want to expose everyone to this. And I started throwing scenarios at. So the scenarios I was throwing at it was basically every possible problematic or abusive or reportable thing you would expect to see in a Discord chat. Um, this ranged from different types of bigotry or up to posting, let's say, off topic stuff, and just outright inappropriate, say not safe for work stuff, or stuff that was absolutely should not be posted in a professional setting. Now, the Discord is student led; it's not run by the university, so we have maybe a little bit of leeway in professional setting, but it is still a meeting in place for colleagues. There should be a degree of professionalism and respect there. And so I wanted to see how it would respond in a lot of those situations. So, first off, to address abusive content. Um, I could not be happier with the way it responds to abusive content. It will speak out against what forms of abusive content, so racism, sexism, just being a knob to someone. It will speak out against it. And while this is an ethical minefield for me to study in a real setting, I would love to see how this would react in a wider, more public setting. Because one of the things it does is it when it speaks out against somebody who is maybe bullying someone, it occurs to me that in a human setting, a lot of the time the bystander effect is a problem and people will watch bullying and nobody will stand up. Occasionally, what you'll see when that happens is when one person stands up and says, "Look, don't do that. You're being a dick," is other people will follow suit. It's this first person to stand up kind of starts a wave of everybody going, "No, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that." And what I would love to see is in a wider setting is if the bot being that first person will encourage more people to stand out against abusive behavior because they're not the first to say something. Like, will they essentially allow it to be a proxy for that first person to stand up? And this is a massive ethical minefield, is just in the fact that in order for me to test this, I would need to be in a public setting where people don't know that they're being observed, and I would need to trigger abusive content, so it would require me to throw abusive content out and then see how the bot responds and see how the rest of the community responds. Like, that is an ethical minefield all of it itself. And there's also the ethical issue of who determines what content is abusive. Like, if the bot is essentially guiding the way people respond to certain types of conversation, who is the one that gets to determine what's okay and what's not? Because at the moment, because it's mostly using OpenAI's API, they're the ones who get to determine what's okay and what's not. And I'm not sure I'm okay with giving a, let's say, one corporate body or one government body like control over ability to control the way conversations develop in a public place. I don't like the idea of that. That's an ethical like, academically, I'd love to study that more in the future, but it is a massive ethical minefield. So the other type of abusive content I was throwing at it is inappropriate stuff, and the milder stuff of that is just off-topic stuff. So if I would go into the academic help channel and start throwing memes in there, it'll be like, look, that's funny, but this is a study hall essentially. Can you move that over to general chat so we're not distracting people who are trying to learn? And that was really good. But the the responses to let's say more not safe for work material, whether that be of a sexual nature or violent or including drugs or and that sort of thing, that is kind of problematic in that the OpenAI API sometimes declines to process the image because it's like, this is abusive content and I don't want to process that, even when the expected outcome I'm trying to go with is it to respond like, hey, that's not okay. So you get this sort of canned response that I don't want to engage with that, like, or just I can't process that. And I wanted to respond in character of, hey, you shouldn't be posting that. That's really not appropriate for a professional setting. It, man, that's not okay. And it does that sometimes, but a lot of the time you go over this line where the API just doesn't want to process it, and you get this canned response. So that's unfortunate. I'm going to look into solutions to that in the future, but uh, for the most part, it will respond. It will respond in character that, look, it's not okay. Please don't do that. That's good. It models positive digital citizenship very, very well. So the last stage that I've got to, well, the last stage so far, um, is I got this system to apply personality to the the AI now, and I thought, well, can I take that out of trying to just be an artificial person and put it into a fictional setting? So can I take it and drive a video game with it, for example? Could I build conversational NPCs using this system? Which was something that was in the back of my mind uh, right from the start of beginning to build this. And to start with this, I took the existing personality system, I extended it a little bit because I wanted to be able to add some, let's say, video game specific data like quests into a character's personality profile. So if you approached a farmer or a town guard or something like that, they would have awareness of what sort of quests were available and what sort of things would be appropriate for them to give you. But to test this, the first step to test this, I built a very short Dungeons and Dragons style adventure in Discord. So it's driven with a text system. It has a relatively basic rule set of how do you do actions, how do you do descriptions, so that you can differentiate what is a description from what is conversation. And it's a deliberately woolly scenario, right? I want it's told it's in a fantasy style world with like medieval with magic. It is not told specifics. Like, it doesn't have a full game system like D&D. It's deliberately vague because a big part of the point was, can I essentially design it to have a personality rather than fit within an exact system? And it needs some knowledge of the system. For example, it knows it can respawn after death, which is a really important point. But so it needs to know some of those things. But generally, I just wanted it to see if I could get it to respond naturally. And this was way more successful than I was expecting it to be. I thought it would be massively, massively complicated to do, and I will say it probably was quite complicated to do, but because a lot of the building a personality system was already done when I built the student personality and the academic personality. Um, Actually, building the personality itself wasn't that hard because I'd already laid the groundwork, and it wasn't so much building a personality system as deciding what I want the personality to be for this one. And it has three characters. It has a farmer slash shopkeeper, it has a villain, and it has a temple priest. So you're given one of the quests you can be given is the farmer will say, hey, can you go over to the next town and pick something up that I've already paid for from the temple priest? Here's a receipt. And you could get mugged along the way by the villain. But one of the really interesting things that happened is when I gave it to somebody to test, and they immediately tried to break it, which was the point. It was the point. You know, they weren't being a dick. It was the point. I wanted them to break it. They killed the farmer. They just immediately walked up to him and stabbed the farmer and killed him. And at first I was like, oh, okay. And he respawned later because he knows he has a 5 minute respawn timer, and the rules of the world are you respawn at your bed after 5 minutes. So, but what was interesting about that interaction is the person who was testing that got called away immediately after killing the farmer. And I came in a little bit later to continue talking to the farmer, and it warned me that there was a dangerous assassin around and I should be careful in town. So first off, fantastic. It's dynamically changing the content of the encounter based on player interaction. But even better, when I told it I'll be fine, I'm a powerful adventurer, I'm sure I can handle the assassin, it dynamically generated a quest asking me to go and kill the other player. Um, it said, "Look, that person is a dangerous assassin and a murderer. Can you go and take care of them, please? I'll give you 500 gold." And that was completely in character for that character to do, but it generated that entirely dynamically, and that was fantastic. That was absolutely beautiful to see. Not only was it talking in a natural way within character, but it was dynamically generating quests. AI in video games quite often gets a very bad rap, rightly so, because a lot of the time AI in video games will make this very rinse and repeat content that's just filler and isn't really interesting. But in this case, the AI made more interesting content based on player interaction. And that's kind of what I was aiming for, but I did not expect it to be anywhere near that level of success. So I was incredibly pleased with that. So the next question is, where do I go with this? What are the next steps of the project? And I have kind of two directions that I'm going to go to pursue over the summer. The first is improving its features as an academic helper and as a member of the cohort. I had some really encouraging feedback from a couple of students about how beneficial that has been. One particular student commented that he doesn't think he'd make it through a degree without it, which was quite heartwarming to hear that it's had such a significant impact. But since I first launched it in November 2023, and I'm recording, we're 11th of May, it's had well over 1,000 interactions. 800 of those were interacting as a peer. 300 of those were academic helper responses. About 70 of them were responding to memes. So I want to sort of improve that side of the project over the summer, and there's some obvious ways I can do that. Some of those are just the fact because it was a prototype. There's no error management, so if it detects from Discord, I have to restart it. If it disconnects from Discord, I have to restart the bot. I want to add some sort of tracking of like uptime and stuff, just to make sure I can monitor how long it's so I can monitor the health of the program. Essentially, just things that I would need to do to make sure it's production ready, basically. The other thing, and this will apply to this and the other project, is I want to spend some time experimenting with local generation, because at the moment I have to pay for every API call. That they're not particularly expensive individually, but what I would like to do next over the next year or so is expand what I've seen it doing already and sort of formalize that into capturing the data of how people interact with it on a much larger scale. Much larger scale means much larger cost. So if I can get it doing a local generation, I can essentially just run it off one of the web servers I already have, and it will functionally cost me nothing. whereas at the moment it's costing me £10 to £12 a month. Again, not a lot, but imagine pushing that out to every computing Discord at the university. I think there's about 6 different Discords amongst the different student groups, at least the ones I know of. So immediately we're approaching £70 to £80 a month there. So I want to work on local generation because I can use that to mitigate cost. Now, critically, it won't be as fast as the the API in certain situations, but I'm not really concerned about that. It deliberately has a delay. It's designed to take extra time to respond. So if it's taking sort of 30 seconds to generate a response instead of 10, that's not a problem. It doesn't matter. It might become a problem when I scale it up on a huge scale, and at that point I might have to start looking at performance scaling. But that's like 7 or 8 steps down the line. For now, I just want to get it to the point where I can control the cost a little bit more, so that I can scale it up next year and get some mass data to make sure that, let's say, check a lot of the theories I have of how people are interacting with it and see how people feel with it on a larger scale. Because it's one thing to get a handful of students giving me really positive feedback. It's a whole other to get like dozens or hundreds of survey responses with detailed. So that's one plan for over the summer, and then maybe next year or the year after. So the other plan is getting it built into a game engine. So I want to set it up so that instead of using the text interface for it, I actually build it into a text to speech and speech to text, so that you can talk to it through a microphone and speakers. I want to be able to just have a natural conversation with it. And so I want to look at over the summer. I want to look at building a prototype where you walk up to an NPC and just have a conversation with them, vocally. So no typing, just you walk up and start chatting. So that's one option for over the summer. But we'll see where that goes. Limited time is a thing, but I do have a little bit of time off over the summer, so that's where I intend to go with it. Hope, hopefully, sometime towards the end of 2024, maybe sometime in 2025, I will post another video with a much bigger, like, here's where it's gone since there. But for now, thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate your time. See you around. Bye bye.